right? Like there's, okay. Yeah, could you, so like I said, we may or may not start with this, but just break it down for me and Ben. Like you're going to a competition and is it all 3 days, like 3 separate days? And then what are you doing on those, like in those 3 different events?
Okay, so normally we will get to a show about Tuesday. We get everything unloaded. We have both carriages and we always take at least 2 horses. So my horse, he's 17-1. He's actually one of the biggest ones at the shows all the time. And then he has a little mini that goes with him that their owner drives as well. He's 34 inches. So we normally take those 2. But we get there on Tuesday. Wednesday is normally jog day. So then we do our vet inspection at an FEI jog. And then some of the shows, you have 2 days of dressage. So it'll depend on what day you go on. So you have Thursday and Friday. And then, so we'll do our draw at jog and say we go on a Thursday. So we have our dressage time at 1 p.m. and we'll walk obstacles anytime between before or after dressage. And then we'll walk obstacles all day on a Friday. And then we have marathon, which normally starts about 9 or 10 a.m. on Saturday. And that is where we go through all the obstacles A through F in order. And you're not allowed to say you need to get to A, but it's on the opposite side. You can't go through F. You have to do it in order. But once you go through the gate, you are good and you can use that gate any way you need to. And then on Sunday, we have cones, which is 20 cones, 1 through 20. And you can have serpentines, which are A through D. And you have to drive them and you have a time allowed. And each ball is worth 3 points. So if you hit a ball, you get 3 penalties.
Okay.
Wow.
And that's the ball sitting on top of the cone.
Correct.
Okay. So there's a lot to chew on there.
Yeah, there certainly is. Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you, you said you travel with 2 horses, but it's my understanding in the competitive driving sport, you know, you can drive a single or a team or just a pair, right? Do all those different configurations compete directly against each other, or are there separate levels for the different configurations of how you're driving?
So we have different divisions. So if you're driving a single pony, you're in your own division. If you have a pair horse, you're in your own division. There is different levels. So we have training through FEI 3-star over here. And it really just depends on where your horses are or where you are. And you don't compete all together. Our single horse division is probably, I want to say, down at Live Oak in Florida, it was 13 competitors. So we're actually pretty small. And we have 2 active FEI teams. They're Chester Weber and Jimmy Fairclough right now. So it's actually really small over here compared to Europe.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Right.
I hadn't really heard of it until Joe talked about you and we talked about having you on the podcast. I feel like I've seen photos, but I had really no idea that was out there. And it seems pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
And since we probably will include this part in the episode, we might as well just announce who you are, Ryley Miller, competitive driver. But this is gonna be a fun podcast because I think there's probably plenty of folks like me who haven't really heard about this before. Like, I don't know about Joe, but over the years, I have had the privilege of getting to drive a couple of teams, but these were like Clydesdale workhorses. And we were doing the equivalent of like first grader math, you know, when it came to driving horses. You hold the stop, you just kind of do whatever you have to get them to go forward, and yet yip and yaw and pull them left and right. And there was not a lot of finesse. And, you know, the idea was the heavier the load, the better the day, because the least chance of them running away with what was behind them. So I was watching you guys do that with the little carts. It's like, wow, that's pretty cool, because you see a lot of comparisons between what a horse would look like under saddle with the ones that you guys drive around from behind, which is kind of cool. So
yeah,
all to say, you're
fun.
going to be explaining a lot about this sport, I'm sure, throughout this entire episode. But one other thing along the lines of the different the different categories. Like if you're driving a single horse, do you get to have a different kind of cart than somebody who's driving a pair or a team, or are pretty much all the carts the same?
So,
and is that correct? Am I calling it the right thing? Is it a cart? I don't want to call it the wrong thing.
Technically, yes. We call them carriages.
Okay. Carriages.
Carriages.
Good.
So
definitely correct me
yes.
if I'm saying stupid stuff.
So it really depends. You have each carriages they're kind of all the same. You have different manufacturers, like you would have saddles. I drive Benningtons, so they're from England, and there's different weights you have to meet. So our marathon vehicle has to be, I believe, 425, around 425 pounds. I'm not sure exactly in the kilograms that we all measure in, but and then you have your marathon vehicle and your presentation vehicle. So your presentation vehicle is used in dressage and cones, and then your marathon is used in marathon. And the presentation looks just nicer and better, and then your marathon is just what you use to go fast. But with the pairs, they have a pole, so in between the two horses, and they're heavier. And then the teams actually have the pole with leader bars, and they are also heavier. So they're all similar, but they're also different.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So like any of the single horse teams, do they have like a single axle cart? Is that allowed? Like you would see in like I don't know, that's what I picture, like somebody driving one horse to town kind of deal in the olden days.
This year there was one lady with a Meadowbrook, which is a single axle. She did dressage and cones in it, but she had a marathon vehicle with the 4 wheels. So it's not as common as it used to be. My mom actually competed when she was young, and they used to drive like Meadowbrooks and these wooden 2-wheel carriages on marathon, and I was like, you're crazy.
Wow. Like I could see how that would get dangerous maybe on the marathon part but from an ergonomic standpoint, it seems like going through the cones, you would have possibly an advantage.
Yes. Yeah, you would. And we have delayed steering on the vehicles now. So then that way it doesn't turn, the back wheels don't turn until the fronts do, and they follow the exact same tracks. And I have rear wheel steering on my vehicles too.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
There's all new things. And we also have 5th wheel brakes so you don't fishtail. And
Yeah. It's like I feel like the first thing I ever saw that had rear wheel steering was like a fire truck, one of those big long fire trucks. And I thought that was like the coolest thing in the world when I was a little kid.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful. Like we can wrap a post in an obstacle with the marathon vehicle and not worry about touching it.
Yeah.
So it's really good.
Yeah. So it, like your outfit, for example, am I understanding correctly? You're using different vehicles for the different events then?
Correct. So we take 2 carriages for my big horse.
Okay.
So he has his presentation vehicle for dressage and cones, and then his marathon vehicle for marathon.
Gotcha. So it's at least two rigs to get you down there then.
Correct.
If you got like the horse trailer.
Yeah, and at lower levels, you're allowed to use the same vehicle, and you can use the same vehicle at FEI too. You just have to have a seat on the back, so that way the person on the back's in the middle for dressage and cones. But you definitely you gain presentation points in dressage if you have a presentation vehicle.
Sure.
So
okay.
We fill our 5-horse head-to-head.
Okay.
With the horses and the carriages.
Yeah,
so do you pack the carriages on top or inside?
So currently, down in Florida, we had the Mini, my big horse, and then my other horse, who the owner drives. Also, he's 16.3, and he's a Dutch harness horse as well. So we had 3 horses in there. Well, 2.5 if you don't want to count the Mini as a horse. But then
you can probably go under the Dutch harness horses, I bet.
You can, yeah.
Yeah. Every Dutch harness horse I've ever been around has been quite leggy.
Yes. So we have 2 styles. We have the new style, which is more finer bone than you see in the fine harness. And then you have Commanda, my horse, who's more stocky and the old style, like you'd see if you look at photos and paintings from the days with the coaches and stuff.
Cool.
But yeah, so we pull the presentation vehicle in, actually goes right next to the Mini. And he goes into we call them the quarter horse stalls because they're really it'd probably be a normal stall for you guys, like a standing stall in the trailer. But our big horses don't fit. So we make his stall smaller. And then the carriage goes next to him and we tie it down. And then the two big horses go up the back ramp. And then the marathon vehicle pulls in front of them.
Okay. Gosh, sounds like you guys got it dialed in then.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Good deal.
So how many days out of the year are you actually on the road towing all that stuff around?
We do the trip to Florida in 2 days, I believe, is what it took us. I'm not sure how long we normally are on the road. It takes about a day for travel and a day back. So I want to say we do 6 to 7 shows a year. We try to hit all of them.
Gotcha. And each show is about a week.
Yeah.
So it's 6 to 7 weeks a year.
Yeah.
You're gone. Okay.
Yeah.
And then we winter in Florida. So we were gone for 4 months.
Okay. That's a long winter.
Yeah, it was nice. All the alligators started coming out after April 1st, though. So.
Oh, okay. You guys go down there first of the year or something, or?
This year we did, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Really cool. And is that just because you could get more done down there, or is it there's quite a bit of competition down there that time of year?
During, I want to say, December until end of March, all the competitions down there. And it's just easier to keep them fit. So when we were down there, we had him doing, towards the end, 14 kilometers a day. He'd go out into the forest and go around on the trails and just get fit for Tryon, because then we hit Tryon on the way home.
Okay. And was Tryon just a week? Okay. Gotcha. Well, that's interesting.
Is there kind of a specific location where a lot of drivers are at, or does the driving community kind of follow the same region where the 3-day eventers and stuff like that go?
I want to say there's a lot of us on the East Coast, but there's also a lot on the West Coast, and kind of spread throughout. We have Kentucky and some in Oklahoma.
Okay.
We used to live in Oklahoma, and there's a small driving community out there.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So
yeah, because it seems like
kind of sounds like you. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you kind of grew up in the driving world then, right? Because you were talking about your parents and stuff. Did they both compete at one point, or do they still compete?
So my grandfather started he had a horse when he was 8, and then he got back from Vietnam and he got back into horses, and he picked up, when he was 13, he started being a blacksmith. And so when he got back, he just decided he wanted to shoe horses the rest of his life. And he got into heavy horses. So when my mom was little, they had a 6-horse hitch and an 8-horse hitch. And then my aunt, who's a few years older than my mom, they were at Devon, and she saw somebody with hackney horses, and she decided she wanted to look like them. So they started with Hungarian horses from Nebraska. They'd go out and pick up a bunch of ones off the range. And so we had teams of Hungarians, and then we got into the hackney horses.
Okay.
So
is that a breed, Hungarian horse?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
They're more popular in Europe now.
Sure.
So my grandfather was actually the team farrier for the Para World Championships with the driving in Hungary in '89.
Cool.
And then my aunt was longlisted for the team in 2000. So, and my mom started judging, and she's an FEI judge now, and she travels and does the shows that I don't take from her.
Yeah. That's I'm sure that's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Because between the two of you guys, and as small as the world is, I'm sure everybody knows you.
Yeah, and my dad used to be into horses a little bit when he was a young guy. He did team roping.
Okay.
He showed cows, and my mom met him out in Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good deal. Cool. So you were just kind of destined to end up in a carriage then?
Yes. My mom was driving. I was a week past my due date, and she was driving horses and working horses up until she had me. And then as soon as I could sit up, I started driving my Mini I had. And then I kind of
wow.
We moved to Oklahoma, and I kind of decided I wanted to ride over driving.
Sure.
And so I took 5 years off, and then I drove at a small pleasure show with a Hackney that we had, and then I didn't want to drive again until 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
Wow.
And now it seems you're hot into it again.
Yeah. This horse that I have now, he's taken me from training level to now we're qualified FEI 3-star driver and horse in 2.5 years.
Wow.
Wow.
So like your world, you mentioned your two guys are Dutch harness horses. Is that what dominates the East Coast, or like what kind of breeds are we talking about when we're talking about FEI competition?
I want to say, I know we have some German riding pony mixes in the horse division. We have Dutch mixes. Currently, I believe the top FEI horse and driver combination, that's the first pick for the World Championships, was a Dutch horse. And
Okay.
I believe the team is made up of 2 Dutch horses and a German riding pony cross. So there's some Dutch horses, but there's also all breeds. And we kind of see that across like the board. People drive anything from like halflingers to, you see some thoroughbreds every so often and quarter horses.
Sure. Okay. Interesting. And are there like Dutch harness breeders in your area, or are the Amish producing them? Like where are these guys coming from?
So we've actually been looking for other ones, but a lot of the times that we see them, the Amish have them, but you don't really see a lot of like good quality Dutch horses unless you look in Europe.
Okay.
But both my guys one was born in Indiana and the other one was born in Ohio. So
Okay.
you find like
Cool.
it's like any horse, you go, you're looking and you find a few nice ones.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So as far as like the training of these type of horses, have you been involved in that part? Do you start them or even do any of the training along the way?
My mom does. So I was kind of raised around young horses, which we had this conversation the other day. I told her, I was like, honestly, I've seen so much stuff. I don't really want to like be a horse trainer the rest of my life. Like, I want to compete and do all like that, but I was like, I don't want to train young green horses. I've helped her start a few throughout the years.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, that's definitely
Can you
something
talk about?
definitely something you can fall into where you're training horses, and if that's all you are, you just keep sending them down the road to somebody else to have a bunch of fun with them. So I totally understand that. But go ahead, Joe.
Well, I'd just be curious to hear what that process looks like, right? Because, like I started a lot of horses. Ben started a lot of horses, but obviously for riding. So it's kind of a different timeline from a physical maturity standpoint and their mental maturity and what their job's going to be. So I'd be curious, like, say I just bought a Dutch harness weanling, right? And I was going to send it to a trainer at whatever point it was ready to be started driving. Like, at what age would I send it, and at what age would it be fair to be like, okay, now you could go take this horse and Ryley could go compete with it?
Okay, so I think it kind of depends on like the horse. Like, I don't know if you guys start them as 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds or how or when you guys start them, but we've always really desensitized them when they were little up until the point we put them in harness. So I would want to say, I think about 3, we started with the long lining, they wore blinders and bits when they were 2, and then really started like long lining them around with like the harness, and then we tie the we make it act like britching. So then their britching that's against their butt is pushed against them so they don't kick or they get that out of their system. So we start long lining them, and then once they get to the point that they're not spooky with the blinders, we proceed to drag a tire with them. That way they have weight behind them, and then just slowly, as they get more and more comfortable, put them into a breaking cart and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Some horses it takes years, and other horses you're like, oh, he's great. You could go take him to a show tomorrow.
Sure. And that's probably with all disciplines. It seems like some of them are just kind of like born ready to rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We had a horse before I was born. My mom and my grandfather and my aunt, they were taking out other horses, and he'd walk the fence and he'd watch them go out the driveway and down the road and come back. And so they came in and ate lunch, and they're like, where's Ron, my grandfather? And they watched him. He long lined the horse down the driveway. He's never really been hooked before, never hooked. And 5 minutes later, he's walking down the road with a carriage attached, and he taught himself how to drive by watching everyone else. He's like, oh, this is what I do.
There you go. Well,
Wow.
and there's something to be said too. You got to start them well, but like the handful of horses I've ever worked with that are cow-bred horses, it's like as soon as they get around cattle, they're like, oh yeah, I kind of get what the deal is here. Like this really kind of perks me up, and I'm interested in this. So, I'm sure there's an element of that too, because I'm kind of like Ben. I've been able to work with a couple of teams. My dad actually, he has a team of Percheron mules that he like kind of uses as like a hobby, and drives the carriage, and he'll drag a sled and stuff, and do like some of the like farm pulls around here and everything. So that's my only kind of draft like pulling type exposure. And but one thing about it, like those draft horses, like they like their job, right? And I realized, it's a different type of horse you're working with, but I imagine it's a similar vibe where they're like, no, I enjoy doing this.
Yeah. He really, Commanda, he enjoys going out. Like, he loves going out. He loves marathon. He loves cones. Dressage is not his favorite. He used to be in a pair with Windfall, the other horse that we have. He used to be in a pair, and he never was really taught to canter. And so now with the FEI single horses, they want them to canter in dressage and do a collected canter, working canter, and an extended canter. And so going through the levels with the 2-star, we had to start doing a working and an extended canter. And he loves cantering. That just made dressage so much better for him. But he was a little too enthusiastic. Yeah. So everything was like an extended canter. And we started his first time cantering in an enclosed ring was November last year. And by April, he was understanding it. So he's come a really long way, but it's really hard, especially like if you take something out of a team or a pair that's not having that experience, to then go ask them to canter when they've never been cantered before. Sure.
Interesting. Do you know of anybody who trains those driving horses, who rides them throughout the training process? Because I was watching some of those dressage tests that they do in the driving competition, and the horses, I mean, they look pretty sharp, and so, but I've never worked with a horse from the ground in that method. And so I was like, man, I wonder if anybody rides these things before they hook the harness up.
Yeah, so actually over in Europe, I think a lot of the horses, they're started under saddle before they're put in harness and ridden dressage. And so you can definitely see that in some of their training when they come over, or you watch it from afar. But over here, there is a lot of people who ride them in like do different, like they do their dressage test as like a ridden dressage test. And I think that's very beneficial for the horses, but it also depends on which horse.
Yeah, that makes sense. So which horse, as in like breed specific, or just like personality for the most part?
Personality.
Yeah.
Comanda's canter is a little too big for us to sit, so we trail ride our guys, but we're like, well, my mom and I are like, do you want to do it? And I'm like, I'm too old to hit the ground.
Yeah. So is trail riding kind of like a time to just give them a little break and chill out, go pack around and just kind of let down? You don't do any schooling on their back?
Correct. Yeah, not with our guys.
Okay.
They just go walk. They like walking around the cornfield, looking at groundhogs and coming back on an easy day. So
good deal.
All right. So I've got another more competition focused question. I don't know. You'll have to correct me. I don't know whether or not it's required to have a groom ride on the cart, but it seems like a lot of people have a groom ride. Who do you have as your groom? Is it like your mom or somebody that you know?
Yeah, I have my mom do it. She's actually been on the back except 2 competitions for me.
Oh, wow.
In the last 2.5 years. The first one she wasn't at, she was judging a different show, and so my dad went with me. We won dressage without my mom, but it was good. He used to navigate a lot for some of the top drivers back in the day, so he was really excited to get back out. And then most recently was try-on. My mom actually twanged her back, pulling apart 2 buckets, and so I had a friend get on for dressage and cones, and I made my mom go on marathon because I was like, I need you on the back for marathon because you put up with me. Yeah.
Well, wow. So is that the title navigator?
For marathon, it's a navigator, and for dressage and cones, it's a groom.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Can you talk about like the role that person plays? Because every video I've seen, obviously, they've had someone on the back of the wagon. But and every now and then when things get serious, it's like they're moving their weight here and they're moving their weight here. But I've always been curious why the extra person?
Okay, so we have it for weight on the back, like you said. It's to keep us from flipping over. And so actually, if your navigator's on the wrong side, if you're making a turn if you're turning left and they're on the right side, you're going to flip over if you're going that fast. So her job is to get her butt as low as she can off the side when we're turning. That way we don't flip. So it's just for like weight. Some people have compared it to like the sailboats. So you're kind of you're on the back to keep you from flipping. And then for dressage, you're on there just for weight. And some of the seats don't have seats that come off. So if you don't go in without a groom, you have an empty seat. And then cones, for me, it's really helpful to have somebody on the back, at least her build, so you don't fishtail, because my horse is very powerful. He actually just whips everything around.
Okay, that makes sense.
Wow.
Yeah, so kind
of like loading down the back of your pickup truck.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
So minis don't need navigators. So if they're under a certain height, they don't need anyone on the back because they're so little, because they can't pull them.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
So, and then teams need 2 people on the back for all phases.
Wow. Okay, so how come it jumps to 2 people when you go to a team?
Because you have 4 horses, so you need a groom for each set of horses. So if something happens, you have a person to head the wheelers and a person to head the leaders. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. But so it's not just symbolic that because you have more horses, you have more grooms. Okay.
You said they're gonna head the leaders and head the followers?
Yeah, head the leaders and head the wheelers.
What does that mean to like head a leader?
So you're just kind of standing either off to the side or in front of them and holding them.
Oh, okay. Like when you're stopped, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm tracking.
Okay, that makes sense. Have you ever seen one flip before? You were talking about, when you're going through the course. Really? Yeah. Man, that sounds like it could become a wreck.
Yeah.
It can. We've had a few incidents, and my mom is a judge. She sees it a lot. You have people who think they can make different turns, or it just happens. You hit an uneven spot on the ground and you can flip over your navigator. Like when you walk the obstacles, we're always really good about looking at the ground. And if you look down and you're like, oh, there's a dip, so make sure you're on that side, or don't go too fast through here. Or when you're leaving, there's an obstacle at Live Oak that always pushes you out on the outside through the back of the vendors' tents, closest that way. And there's a hump. So you either have to make sure you're going slow or go all the way to the outside so you don't go halfway up on that hump. So
okay. Yeah, one indication to me that there is some threat of danger is the fact that you guys are pretty geared up in protective equipment when you're going through those courses. Yeah, are you familiar with like chuck wagon racing?
Yes,
I know they do it at the Calgary Stampede. That is the craziest thing, but those guys, I don't think a lot of them have protective equipment, which to me boggles my mind.
I don't think so.
Like straw hat and a Western shirt, and they're going balls to the walls.
Yep, yeah. It's crazy. We watch it like on the computers and stuff, and we're like, and people think we're crazy.
I know you guys look very safe. I'll give you that, but it looks, it's like everything looks happy and safe and fun, I'm sure, until one of those carts flip. That's got to be a pain.
You can see, like, you have certain people that you close your eyes when they go through obstacles.
Oh,
Because you're like, I don't want to see anything. I don't want to see it. But it's definitely fun because you also have a time allowed. So you have a minimum and a maximum, and then you have your target time. So I think our target at one show was, I don't know why it sticks out to me so much, like 28:15. So, and we have, you will need to be at like, this is a funny story. We were at Tryon, and so our first kilometer was 4:19, I think, or something like that. And you've been to Tryon, Joe. Ben, have you ever been to Tryon?
I have.
Okay, so there's this giant hill going to the cross country course, and it's about a kilometer long, and all controlled warm up where we just walk around our controlled warm up. If he wants to stand, he can stand, and it's about 25 minutes in there. And then you're allowed to go to section B, which is all the obstacles and all the fun stuff. And so we're at vet, and he didn't really want to stand beforehand, and that's normal for him. So I barely touched my brakes, and I had enough, and I was like, okay, we're fine. My brakes are working. They said go. We started B. We went over the hill. And I had no carriage brakes. And my mom was yelling at me. She was like, aren't you going to hit your brakes? And I was like, I'm trying. And she's like, what do you mean you're trying? You need to use your brakes. And she was actually leaning over the side, pumping my brakes, trying to get them to work.
Oh.
And we did our first kilometer in, I think, under 2 minutes or 2:17 or something. And it was all he could do to hold us back going down the hill. And it's kind of, you can't turn around or else you're going to flip. So... And once you get down there, it's relatively flat. So we actually had our worst marathon to date because we didn't have any carriage brakes. And I couldn't push him because I use my brake a lot to take the weight of the carriage fishtailing when he goes and whips it around. So we just gingerly went through because it was all I needed to do was complete it for my 2-start account.
Gotcha.
Dang.
So
that story just reminded me of like a very hairy situation. We had a load of people on a hay wagon. I think we had I want to say 15 people, and then the driver and myself, and we had 2 Percherons, and we were going down a hill on ice, and we didn't have brakes. Isn't that crazy? Like, you guys have brakes on your little cart, and we had this big wagon, no brakes. The brakes were the butts of these Percherons, right? And so we're going down this hill, and I think we both realized as we crested that hill, we had way too much weight and the hill was too steep. And so you saw that harness dig into their hindquarters, and the whole cart felt funny, and the, and the tongue kind of was like wedging sideways. And then both horses started slipping. And I mean, it was just it was one of those end of your life moments. And the hill wasn't that long, and the driver just sped them up, and we ran them ahead of the cart down the hill and got a little speed and just kind of went up the other side. But with the ice and all that stuff, and that's probably one of the worst potential situations I've been in on a horse. But I think that's so funny that people drive these draft horse. It's kind of like the chuck wagon races. Like, in certain parts of the country, people get away with some really dangerous stuff on horses, and competition really breeds safety. Like, the fact you guys even have brakes, it's it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yet there's other people that would never think of that. They're like, oh, the horses are pulling it. I mean, they got us going. They can get us stopped. They don't think about an icy hill with, a 10-degree pitch.
Yeah. Yeah, and the one thing I just remember her yelling is, do not let him break into a canter, because if he starts cantering and then he slips and falls, then we're, done for.
Oh, that'd be terrible.
Okay, so I think he was trotting I think he was doing 19 kph going down the hill at a big trot, and he was just like, kid, are you going to use your brakes?
That's a pretty decent trot. Wish I could get my horse to trot that fast. Wow.
Yeah.
So
we go ahead.
No, you're good.
So we with him, we work him we try to work him 5 to 6 days a week. He hates having more than one day off. It sounds really stupid. But after Live Oak, because he was really, really good at Live Oak. And it was our second 2-star, and we're like, we're in Florida still. We're like, we'll give him 3 days off, and we'll start him back up. And by the second day, he was beating the barn down, and all he wanted to do is just go for a long walk with the carriage down the forest trail and come back, and he was like happy as could be. So we try to work him like 5 to 6 days a week, even if it's just walking down the road a mile and back. But he normally does, right now he's doing about 8 kilometers for 4 days a week. So we have him pretty fit. Knock on wood.
Yeah. So I guess that's another question I have is, it's one thing to get these horses broke to where they can handle everything. But it's another thing entirely, like the fitness level involved. And it sounds like you're pretty regimented on like how often they work. But I guess one advantage, I don't know a lot about driving, but I imagine in some ways it's probably easier on them than if they're like a horse that's being ridden, right? Because it's like probably a lot less impact, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
But like, how do you gauge that? Like, we need to amp it up, we need to amp it down. Do your parents help you with that? Do you have things you look for? Like, we had one guy on here who was a steeplechase trainer. Mm-hmm. And he said one thing he did for all his steeplechase horses was long trots on like gravel roads, mm-hmm. like hard dirt roads, to what he referred to as tightening up the tendons and just kind of like building up that strength. So what are indicators you look for that physically my horse is ready to go compete?
With Commanda, he's a big boy. He's 17-1, like I said. And he's always, our vet's always like, oh, he's a little fat. And like, by the time you get through a competition, probably with the jumper horses too, like they drop some weight. And so with him, with his fitness, we do, like I said, 8 kilometers a day, but he does trots, like long trots, like kind of like you said, just out in the big fields where we train, and we'll push him to like 17 kph, because on marathon you only have to do 14. So if you can get his lungs and everything built up to that, he gets out there and he's like, oh, this is really easy. And he can make time really easily. We kind of just monitor him when he gets back and see how hot he is. And we do that heat plus humidity to see what it like is like for him. But we also kind of just like gauge, like if he gets back and it's like 60 degrees, say with 30% humidity, and he's hot, then we know that he needs to be fitter. But kind of just gauge it on him. Sometimes he gets out into the fields that we train in and he just wants to go. Like right now, he's really fit with how he's acting with training. And he has a big personality. So, and he kind of just tells us what he needs. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does. And then is there, like what kind of, do you do any sort of maintenance on him? Like do you, like poultice or ice him or any sort of particular farrier work to kind of maintain, where he's being driven, or how does that all work?
My grandfather's our farrier. I'm very lucky. So
cool.
Anytime I have, like if he has a shoe loose out in the field, I call him. And actually, everyone's living out in running sheds because unfortunately last April we lost our barn in a barn fire. So they've gone from being in a 12 by 12 stalls to being out in running sheds, and they've actually adjusted really well. So it's a little bit harder to keep his like everyday maintenance on over the last year, but we've gotten it down to he gets cold hosed after each work. He gets ice boots on. He gets back on track. All of his back on track gear on. He actually wears a magnetic blanket. Just different little things. He hasn't had so like much maintenance, and we get him x-rayed once a year at least to make sure that everything's still good. And with him, because a lot of people they're like, oh, we retired our horse, because he's 17. He just turned 17. I had his little birthday party for him and everything, and everyone's like, oh, he's getting old, and our just response is, well, when he stops on a marathon one day and is like, okay, I'm done, because that's his personality, we'll be like, okay, he's ready to retire. But he's the type that would probably drive until he drops. That's what his mentality is. He'd just be like, going. But we figure he has 3 more years at like the top level.
Okay.
And then slowly back off. But
is that common? That longevity?
Yes and no. Sometimes there's been horses that go over and they're like 20-something years old to go compete at the Worlds. But you also have like the different personalities. So he's more like a team horse. So what they want for like the foreign hands, where they just keep going, like they don't have a drive to stop. They just keep going until they drop. But then we have Windfall, who's the exact opposite. It's like, oh, can we be done yet? I've been working for 30 minutes. I'm done.
So are there any issues that the horses can develop that are unique to the driving community, and just injuries most people wouldn't see a horse have?
I think we have a lot of suspensory injuries, as well as hock issues. I've seen a lot of hock issues, but yeah, there's not really much. They might have, like, especially they flip, then like shoulder injuries.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Windfall actually, like, they flipped a few years ago in a pair, and our chiropractor who also does myofascial came out, and we asked her, like, everyone keeps saying that he has like a extra rib or something because he has these 2 bumps on each side, and she was messing with it, and she goes, I think it's actually like scar tissue from when they flipped and he tore stomach muscles.
Oh,
so
wow.
I think we see, but I definitely think we see like more stifle, hock, and like suspensory injuries.
Sure. And is that just because, I guess, I know they're pulling, but for them it's like a pushing sensation, right? Is that, you think it's related to that movement versus a, like a horse that's being ridden, it's more kind of impact driven?
Possibly. I see a lot.
I don't know. I'm just asking you.
No, yeah. I've heard a lot of the vets talk about like weak stifles after they've been driven for many years and like hocks. So I think it's just kind of like they use they're pulling from their collar in the front, but at the same time, I think it's also like you said, like a pushing, from the carriage. Yeah.
Well, because like for them, like I realize they're pulling a carriage, but it would be like if I'm going to pull somebody, but if you put like a board in front of me and I pushed on the board to pull everybody.
Like you want them to pull from the collars, but also push into their collars.
Yeah.
So they're pulling from the saddles, they're pulling from their backs, which isn't good.
Yeah. I have noticed the horses I've been around that have been like pulling horses and draft horses for like a extended career, like the ones that get up into their teens, they definitely seem like they're muscled differently than like a horse that's what I would consider muscled correctly if they've been ridden correctly all their life. You know, it's definitely, it's like how you can tell like a soccer player versus a swimmer or something like that. But that stuff's definitely apparent to me.
We see a lot of undernecks. So recently the new fad has been pushing them into your hand and rushing them instead of fixing the problem. I've noticed with some trainers. So they'll be pushing them, just hurry them up into your hand and make a false frame as well.
Gotcha.
And a lot of behind the verticals.
Yeah, that's not a new trend in riding at all. So
I know,
you guys finally caught up.
I know.
Sounds like an old story.
We see a lot of behind the vertical and stuff, but a lot of that like rushing along to get like instant results has been very relevant since I've been back into it. Like, really relevant.
Yeah, we don't have to get super into the weeds. Well, I guess we can. We got all the time in the world. But like, Ben and I, like I'll speak for me, and I think Ben's kind of a similar philosophy. But generally, like for riding horses, I don't really think there's any point in using anything where you have like leverage or pulley systems, like draw reins or tie downs or anything like that. Because while it might show what an uneducated person might think of as an immediate result, like it never gets you to the end result properly. It always takes away something from the horse, and generally from what I've found in the horses I work with and the disciplines I've worked in, it it teaches that kind of what you were saying, that false frame where putting a horse into collection doesn't translate all the way back to their hind end where the powerhouse is. So in your world, are there, I mean, driving is kind of a pulley system, right? Not like that I think it's a bad way, but
no, yeah.
It you know, that was one thing that blew my mind when my dad got into driving and I was helping him, and we had like this set of DVDs he watched. This guy was like, "Oh, this is how you like set up your team and do all this stuff." And it was really cool. But it was like, man, if riding is an art, driving is a science. Like there are very particular, like, this needs to be this distance and this needs to be this distance and this is the angle here, and it's like a very particular, and it's not like, obviously there's feel involved, but there is a lot of kind of hard and fast rules, it seems like, in terms of your setup and all your gear and everything. But in that, like, if someone's training horses, are there like the equivalents of draw reins and tie downs and stuff like that people will use on their horses? Yeah.
And you actually see it in the lunging rings as well sometimes at the shows, especially the stewards aren't out. So they'll do it the day before. You don't start your show until an hour before jog. So they'll be out there the morning of jog before anything, and they'll be lunging them and with different systems, and it's illegal. We have actually, in the rule book, we have photos of what you can and can't use. So they're allowed to use a rope, I believe, from the bit and then just through their legs and over the back. But you can't use like a passoa or anything. I believe. We don't use them, so I'm like, the rule doesn't apply to me, so I don't use them.
Yeah. So. Well, that's cool. That's cool that you guys don't use that stuff, because it kind of seems to parallel a lot of what Ben and I have been taught about riding horses.
Yeah. We've had them since March 2nd, 2021. So in the 3 years, I've been competitively competing for 2.5. But in the 3 years, it's been a challenge. We've gotten his head. He used to go like, those Dutch fine horses. And we finally got him to be like, we say head down, and he like drops his head and goes into a beautiful stretchy trot. Which it wasn't fun when I was younger. I was 16, but it wasn't fun because in the fact of I went training level with a horse that was going intermediate advanced. So he had that advanced frame. And so everyone's like, he's supposed to be a training level horse right now. So we get knocked down actually a lot for him in his frame. Okay,
so he was kind of what you're saying is he was kind of too done up for the level you were competing at.
Yeah. And it's gotten easier that last year we won the intermediate championship with the single horses, and at the intermediate level we were getting rewarded for his more uphill frame. So as you climbed up the levels, it got actually easier.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Well, okay, I think I'm gonna.
Well, you guys have. Well, let me just say this one thing. You guys at least have the hunters beat, like, because when we go to the hunter A shows, I see people that will be in the schooling ring, like jumping horses, schooling horses in a set of draw reins, and then their groom runs over, pulls off the draw reins, and they walk into the ring, and they're like, "Yep, we're good now." And like I'm sitting there, and I'm like looking at the steward, but obviously it's allowed. But every time I go and see that stuff, I'm like, how? Like, if it's going to be illegal, just make it illegal, right? But if you can literally school in it until the moment you set foot into the ring, go in, jump your 8 jumps, and then come back out, like, what's the point? Like, what are you like? It's just optics at that point, right? Like, you don't want them in the pictures when people like publish pictures from the shows and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have a lot of rules about whips and stuff. So marathon, a lot of people, my mom, when she judges, she counts how many times they hit their horses with whips. She's pulled people over. She's like, did you really have to hit them 36 times in the water?
Dang.
And so I've always been overly paranoid about my whip with my mom being a judge. So I've always been really cautious with mine. But yeah.
I'm sure you would.
It's crazy sometimes.
So a lot of the cues, are they vocal? Because when you were talking about driving them up
Yeah.
a bit, I mean, I understand, if you're riding, you're using your legs, but if you're driving a horse, is it like vocal commands? And then I don't know if you guys do anything with your reins, and then maybe the whip, is there kind of a progression from, put it this way, what's your lightest signal to get the horse to go? And then what's kind of your backup plan B? And then
So I would say with him, we've taught him now, you just say, whoa, walk on, trot, go on. His canter, he has multiple different canter cues now, which is it's so much fun. So his marathon canter cue to gallop into an obstacle is, are you ready? And then command a canter. And then his dressage canter is now command a canter. And then for his collected canter, it is now turned into command a canter and then easy. So he has a lot of different cues, but we half halt with our reins, and then you tap with your whip on whichever side you need them to bend. So it's it's vocal, but it's also rein signals. But I would say it's mostly your voice.
Okay.
So you're tapping them with the whip. Like if you want to go right, you'll tap them on their right side to kind of draw their attention that way.
With him, yeah. So we half halt, and then he also knows, he's very smart. He knows his rights and his lefts. An obstacle, you yell right and he'll turn right. He knows how to count. So beginning of marathon, when they're going like 10, 9, 8, 7, and then once they get to 1 and they go, we can't have anyone count around him because then he gets excited.
Yeah.
And as soon as they say 1, he starts to go. And I'm like, oh my God.
That's funny. I've gotten off the track thoroughbred mare. Have you ever seen that deal where people take off the track thoroughbreds and they'll just be like asleep in their stall, and then on your phone you can play like the trumpet that they do before the races? I
do that to my aunt and uncle's horses. I'm like evil.
Yeah. I've got a horse that like she could be like asleep with her nose like 6 inches off the ground, and if she hears that, she's like, oh my gosh, it's go time.
Yeah. My uncle trains race horses, so I go and when I help them, I'm like, are you guys gonna react to the start post? So but he's really smart, and actually going from intermediate, because with training level, back to one of your questions about like the different levels, you have training is A through D at USCF, and prelims A through D, intermediates A through E, and then FEI and advanced are all A through Fs. So, and then we also have ADS, which is the American Driving Society, and they do smaller shows. So he went from going A through E, and as soon as the first time we did advanced marathon was at Spring Fling at Florida Horse Park in February, and he hit E, and he was like, okay, we're done. Like, we go now. And I just remember I was like, no, we need to go through F. And then once the third obstacle, he's like, oh, okay, we go to F now. Like, he's really smart, and he picked up on it really quick. And we were all shocked because we were like, he was just like, oh, no, we can't leave yet. We need to find F, guys. Like, what are you guys doing?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
No, that's pretty cool. I think.
Sounds like he knows his job pretty well then.
Yes, and he loves it.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Good.
Do you find that, like, have you messed with many other horse breeds? I know you said you spent some time riding, and then you just got back into this, in 2021. Out of all the different horse breeds that you've been around, do you think the Dutch harness horses are a bit, I don't know how to say it, like a little smarter, basically? Like they pick up on that stuff?
I think it depends on which horse, like any. I would say he's definitely one of the smartest horses I've been around. We have some hackneys now. We have a quarter horse, which is like dumber than a box of rocks. He's not the smartest. He's really smart when he wants to be, but then other times, like, he's really smart to the fact that you'll be riding and somebody in front of you will get dumped, and he's like, oh, that looks really fun.
Yeah.
And he just drops his shoulder out, and you're like on the ground, and you're like, oh, thanks. I think commanded with the Dutch harness horses has definitely been like some of the smarter ones. I had an appendix for a while. We had Welsh ponies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that I'd say currently.
Yeah. Well, and there's something to be said for like having the drive to do it. Because I know with dogs, right? Like they talk about dog breeds being smart or not smart. And like they say border collies are one of the smartest dog breeds. But they base that off of trainability and drive. And, gosh, few dogs love their jobs more than the way like a well-trained border collie loves their job and like wants to feel back to a person and like take direction. But I've been around other dogs where I'm like, that dog is pretty smart and like could definitely solve problems and figure things out. But I don't know that that dog has a lot of drive to like help a human out the way a border collie is almost like needy in the way that they like need to help a human. And like the horse you're describing, I feel like I've been around horses that are kind of the same way. Like I've been around horses where like, oh, they get in a bind, like they're pretty switched on and they can still be really good horses. But then there's other horses that are like, it's almost like they're smart and they have that need to please. And those are horses that you can get a lot out of because that's just kind of like in them already.
Yeah. I would definitely say with him, his personality came out about Tryon, which was September last year. He was very standoffish when we got him. He was always very sweet and he always liked to do his job, but he like now it's like he sees the bag of alfalfa and it's like the end of the world. And if you don't give it, if you have cookies in your pocket, he's going to throw you across the stall. And it's like his personalities come out and he loves doing stupid little things. Like he'll wear tiaras if I want him to and stuff. But he's definitely, we knew he was tough. And a lot of people like in the community, like have had a lot of their hands in him, like trainers. And they're all like, oh, he's easy. Like you're getting so far with him because he's an easy horse. And, he's actually, my mom says, one of the toughest horses she's ever like dealt with. Like if it's not his way, it's like, oh, I'm not doing it. Like I'm good.
Sure.
But we were at Live Oak and our FEI vet, she scanned his microchip in. We walked up and she looked at his name and she looked at him. She goes, I helped break him as a 3-year-old into the team. She was, I can't believe he's doing this still. He was so tough. Wow. We're like, so we're not going crazy. Yeah. He's like one of those, once you get into his little bubble, he'll walk through fire for you.
Yeah. Well, you know, like along the lines of what Joe was saying, I think a lot of people forget, whether you're talking about horses or dogs or any animal that's trained, you know, they forget the context of that animal's surroundings. And so, you know, the old trail horse that's bad and bucks people off or wanders around, like he doesn't have any structure. There's nothing required of him. And so he doesn't really take it serious. And so most horses, if they get put into a job, maybe they're a little slower mentally and physically, but if there's an actual requirement, you know, asked of them, and then there's consequences and there's rewards, I mean, a lot of them start shaping up. And whether they have to start listening for numeric, you know, sounds, or they start counting posts or looking out for stuff on the ground or thinking when they see you pull a rope down or, you know, act different when they approach an obstacle and they've got a cart behind them, whatever it is, if they're in an environment where there is consequences and there is structure, they start getting a little smart, you know, quicker than some horse that they might have a job all day long, but the person riding them has zero structure to the way they ride. Well, their horse is just going to be mentally lazy as they are. So that's probably a big factor. And then it just depends on how athletic your horse is. And maybe he's got more brain capacity or a little less, you know, depending. But,
yeah. And talking about the athletic.
Go ahead.
Talking about the athletic, going back to Live Oak. So that's like, I would say like our biggest show of the year over here, because it has all the jumpers and then it has all the FEI driving horses and intermediate. And, he was actually stabled next to all the little kids. So they had a little kid division and he was next to the group that was, I want to say 8 to 12, I think is their age. And these 2 little girls, they absolutely adore him. And they have stickers. They made stickers of him and everything. And so we were stabled next to them. And he's like the sweetest horse ever. And everyone's like, oh my God, he's so big. He's so big. And I'm like, yeah. And then they went out and watched us on Marathon. And everyone thinks he's really like clunky. I've gotten told before that, oh, he's you know, he's just a big horse. Like he must be clunky. But I actually have this photo of him and I can send it to you later, Joe, if you want. He's at an obstacle in Live Oak and he looks like a barrel horse going around a corner and everyone watches him that obstacle and they're like, he can get really low and he can be really fast. And I'm like, he's really cat-like. But yeah, he definitely shocks some people, especially when we first came out, like, because he's so big. Like, he's like I said, like one of the biggest ones there. I think there's one other horse that's his height at the shows normally, and that's it.
Yeah. So obviously you love your horse, and it sounds like you guys have gotten along and progressed really well together. But if someone was going to go out to buy a horse and get really competitive at this, what would, say they hired you to like consult for them, what would you say is like the prototypical, like, this is what I would want in a horse in terms of like size, conformation, what kind of personality you would look for? Like, what makes a good driving horse in your opinion?
I would say, like, if I was going out and looking for a horse, not to match Commanda, so let's take him out of this. I would definitely want something smaller, under 16 hands, between that 14.3 and 16 hand range. Smaller the better. The only challenge you have with smaller horses that are just horses are you have to make horse speeds. So like the ponies at FEI are 13 kph and horses are 14, but you're smaller in the obstacles, so you're actually quicker. So I would say smaller horse, and then just conformation doesn't matter as much in as in other disciplines, as long as they have that drive to do it. As long as their conformation isn't too bad. Like, they can be close behind, because you can fix that with some shoeing, like you can make them out a little bit more. But I would say definitely personality is a really big thing, because they have to love their job, and for me, I have to have a horse that's going to be like kind of like a clown, so you can like mess around with it. Sometimes you have those really, really serious horses and you're like, they're kind of like people and you're like, okay, I can't like joke with you. But definitely like a horse that could take a joke makes a good like driving horse. And not noise sensitive. Definitely.
Sure. Yeah.
And not scooty horses. For me personally, I don't like horses that are scooty or unpredictable.
Scooty, you mean like they'll spook and stuff?
Yeah, like over little things. Like Comanda's scared of squirrels, for example. I don't know why. I don't know if he got attacked by a squirrel once. He's terrified of squirrels. But definitely like not for a driving horse. They can't be like unpredictable. Like if they're gonna run away. Yeah. So
sure. Just because there's 500 pounds attached to them all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little different than your quarter horse kind of like jumping over 3 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just sitting on their back and you're like, oh, what was that? Who cares? Keep going. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what, this is a good segue into this then. Talk about what you feel like the blinders do. Because obviously pretty much every horse that gets driven has blinders on.
Mm-hmm.
But, people might ride around on the same roads on horseback and the horses don't have blinders on. Like, what is the rhetoric behind the blinders?
So some horses can go on an open bridle. There is a family friend who competes FEI. We've competed against him this winter. He drives his horse in an open bridle because she likes to be able to see. But 9 out of 10 horses will freak out if they see the carriage behind them.
Okay.
So we always start them with blinders on, and then if they're too spooky with the blinders on, then we take them off without being attached to the carriage and like drag things or like back them up. But some of them, they freak out if they can see the carriage behind them because they're like, what's following me?
Even though they can feel and hear it?
Hear it. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I've always like it. I don't know. It's like hubcaps on cars. It's like, yeah, they're just always there. But I'd never really thought about why they have blinders on. Like, the only other time I've seen blinders is like people race horses in blinders.
Yeah.
And that almost is more intuitive to me, right? Mm-hmm. Like why you put the race horses in the blinders because you want them so focused, but that's for like not a very long amount of time. If you're going to go out and drive all morning with your horse, I didn't understand the blinders thing, but that makes sense.
And we have different styles. So like marathon, we have half cups. So that way they can see more. But some of the horses can't handle seeing more. Like they get too distracted. And we also have rules. The blinders can't be too close in. So, so that way they're not touching their eyes or something. So yeah, there's a lot of different rules, but we always drove with blinders my whole life.
Sure.
Okay.
No, I get it.
And then like the bits are all different too. So we also have rules about all the bits like in the hunter world and other disciplines.
Yeah.
So
Are they like, are the bits leverage bits, or are they more akin to like snaffles, or what kind of bit is most common?
most common I would say is a mullen mouth or a low port. You see a lot of those. We have Commander goes in a low port with 2 rollers, and he has a slobber bar on the bottom. And so it used to be a bit we used for the coaching horses, and he also has a tool. It's a tulip bit, so that way when he starts getting heavy and starts hanging, he can't hang with that bit because of the hinge. So I can just kind of throw out my hand, and he can't hang on me. But some horses go easily in a snaffle. You see them at shows, and they're just like happy as can be. And then some horses, you watch them unbridle the horse, and he has like the max legal FEI port you can have in.
Sure.
Okay.
So it really just depends. But you see a lot of the Amish people with snaffles.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Well, yeah, they just work them so hard the horse don't want to go anywhere, right?
Yeah, and the checks. They keep their heads off from leaning on them, so they have the checks.
All right. I'm going to jump in here because I want to get to this while we still have time. I am super interested in the business model of a competitive driver. So don't feel like you need to divulge exactly what you're doing or any real specifics if you don't want to. And I know this is something, you've been at this for just a couple years now, but it gives you lots of room because you can talk about maybe somebody you look up to that you like the way they do it, or talk about the way you are doing it now and where you want to go with it. But just like in, the rein cow horse world, guys will take on horses and show them for other people. And there's kind of a monetary structure there. Maybe a guy that team ropes, he's going to jackpots. He might take on some horses as well. Everybody has their own setup. A lot of English people have training barns and they figure it out that way. So what's the business model? Let's start with that. What's the business model that you're currently pursuing? And then, you can go from there into what kind of the general, most effective way it is to be a competitive driver.
So I would say currently I'm going to start college in a month. So I'm going to do online so I can keep doing the horses. But if I was to have some clients, like lower level clients or like kids with their own horses, because I don't have the ability currently to have lesson horses. So I would take on some of those, but I would say that right now it's kind of just focusing on our own. So the lady who owns the horses now are my mom. It's my mom's family friend, and so she's known me since I've been 5, actually. So it's kind of fun to like go to horse shows with her because she's like a second mother, and we all kind of just have fun. But so we have our little team, which we call BPM Sport Horses, and but somebody else in the driving world, there's a lot of them. So like the top drivers, they have a lot of clients, and that's how they bring in their money because there's not a lot of money to be won in the driving. I think Tryon's $300 for the winner in each division at FEI, but it's much bigger over in Europe, like I said. But they definitely just a lot of clients. They show clients horses. Sometimes if you get a sponsor, like a big sponsor that wants you to drive these horses, they'll be like, hey, I'll pay you this much a year to be exclusively like, drive my pair of horses. You make the team and I'll pay you this much and have clients type thing.
Okay.
So it really just depends, but it's not super big over here like you'd see in like the team roping or like barrel racing or something like that.
Okay. So what is the largest show? Is it Tryon?
Tryon has 2, but I would say the largest show that draws the most people at the top level would definitely be Live Oak International.
Okay.
And is that in Florida?
Yes, it's in Ocala. It's actually hosted at Chester Weber's farm. So he has all the FEI jumpers and anywhere from intermediate to FEI 3-star.
Okay. And is 3-star the highest in driving?
Yes.
Okay.
Wow.
Good deal. Well, let's talk about Europe for a second then. You mentioned that that's kind of the bigger scale. Where where in Europe exactly? Is it just like across the board? Are there certain countries that on an FEI level, it's like, oh yeah, these guys dominate driving? Like what does the international landscape look like?
I would say currently, so this year, the World Championships for children are being held, the European World Championships are being held in Sweden, actually this weekend. And then, or next weekend, one of the two. And then the four-in-hands are being held in Hungary, and then singles are being held in France. So, and France is currently like dominating with the World Championships. They've had, this is going to be, I think, their third one they've had there. Yeah, third. And then they're going to have ponies there next year at the same venue. But between France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany, I would say, and Hungary are the big ones, and Sweden.
Okay.
For FEI.
Cool. Why Hungary seems to be like the standout of that group? Why Hungary? Do you have any idea?
I'm not sure. It's always kind of been there. Like my grandfather was the team farrier in '89. He went over to Hungary. Yeah. So it's always kind of just been there.
Interesting. Well, I know there's a lot of horses there, but I wouldn't have, if you had to make me guess a driving powerhouse, I wouldn't have guessed Hungary.
Yeah, and there's a lot of drivers based out of Hungary, and currently the pair team that won the gold last year, and I guess it's been like this forever. My mom told me, she's like, yeah, the Hungarian drivers, they're like the top. Like, they go out to win each time, like, you know.
Yeah.
So she's like, they're the ones that are like the top. Yeah.
Wow. So have you been, or do you have plans to go and compete in your?
My plans are I'd like to go over next summer to go compete. I don't think Command is going to be a horse that's going to ever go over.
Okay.
For the sole reason I don't think he'd do well on the plane. He doesn't like being on a trailer for more than 10 hours, so I don't think he would handle a plane ride very well.
Yeah.
So it'd kind of be
and the quarantine probably be hard on a horse like that too.
Yeah.
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 So what would that look like then in terms of finding a team and a horse over there?
We have a lot of family friends. I actually got offered to go over and drive ponies this summer.
Oh, nice.
But I had too many things come up, and I was like, I really want to work on Commander's Canner and do different things over here. So I'll probably go over next summer.
Oh, great.
That's my plan. So, yeah.
That'll be slick.
It'll be good.
Now, do you have much team experience, or has all your competition just been with the single horse?
So I've just competed with a single. Well, I've also competed pleasure driving. So like just the pleasure classes where you see and they go around in like the circles and they call like walk, trot, and strong trot and slow trot. In 2021 and 2022 with both of the horses, I was a pair and junior champion both years at Lexington Carriage Classic, which was a lot of fun. I do enjoy the pleasure aspect of it, just not as much. I enjoy doing the combined driving. My family used to show a team of hackneys with a coach. We went up to Canada. We've been to Devon. We won the championship at Devon in 2010. So when I was little, my aunt and my mom and everyone would like hand me the reins, and I just walked down the road. But actually this winter we went over to a friend's and I drove his FEI team, and it was fun. So I've driven the team, and it was actually, I found it pretty easy, but I have experience with like the pairs more so than a team.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, yeah, so that, I guess that's kind of what I was getting at. Do you, people that are good at driving, it's like they're just good at driving, or it's like, oh, like they've dominated with a single horse, if they've dominated with a pair, or they've dominated with a team.
Yeah.
And then they more or less stay in their lane, or can they just bounce around and it's driving is driving?
Sometimes you have people who bounce around, and sometimes you have people who are like, they're a much better single driver than they are a pair driver. And then you have people who are like, they're a much better team driver than they are a single driver. So you kind of find what you're good at. So, you know, it's kind of all over the board. And then you have people who are much better pony drivers than they are horse drivers.
Interesting. Now, with a team versus a single horse, do you feel like that puts more or less responsibility on the driver when you have a team?
I think it puts a little bit more, because you're dealing with more horses. So like if you're in an obstacle and then you they just decide not to go away, they'll turn around on you. The leaders will, because they're not connected in any sense to like they just have their leader bars, but they can still spin on you, and you'll be all of a sudden you'll be like, oh, you're facing me.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because it's that. I don't know. I feel like I could see it almost both ways, right? So like if it's just you and one horse, like that connection's pretty cut and dry.
Mm-hmm.
But say you had a good team, and maybe I'm sure it is to manage 4 horses, right? But say you had a good team, it's like you could drop the ball and maybe mess up your one horse, but then you got 3 guys over here to like fill in for you. Or like, I don't know how it works, but you know what I mean? Like if you have a broke team, obviously you want everything firing on all cylinders, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like that to work out. Where if it's just one horse, it's like, well, it's you and me, bud. So if we don't get it done, like ain't nobody getting it done. Yeah.
You can see that, like especially if you watch people with like good teams, like you can see if a wheeler just stops, they just get drug around by the rest of the horses, and their job still gets done. So you can see that definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. That's a cool dynamic.
So then along these lines, I've got kind of a question about scoring. It's my understanding that a perfect score is 0, and then you don't want to get a very high score. You're trying to keep your numbers pretty low. Is it set up so that a perfect score is attainable of 0, or do people, like if you're really good, are you getting a negative score? Kind of how does that work?
So like in dressage?
Yeah.
Like in dressage when you're getting judged. Yeah. So you actually want a higher score.
Oh, so even for
your overall score.
Really even for competitive driving.
Yes. So in dressage you want like it's scored 0 to 10. So you want to get like a 10 if you can on a movement. 0 means you didn't do it at all. So that'd be like asking your horse to canter and he just didn't canter and you just got faster in your trot. So it'd be a 0. If they pick up the wrong lead, it's an automatic 4. So you want the higher the better. And then it gets factored in just like ridden dressage. And then, so it all gets factored in, you get a percentage. So, and then it translates to penalty points. So you want the less penalty points. So a good dressage score to be competitive at the FEI single level at 3-star would probably be a 47 in dressage.
Okay.
So you want the lower the better, but you want the higher scores on your dressage sheet. And then it all gets calculated. Okay.
No, I'm glad you clarified that.
So like a 40 would be better than a 47.
Okay. I'm glad you clarified that because I was thinking it was almost like playing golf or something. Like they were, like you wanted to be really low because the only thing they tallied up were your mistakes.
Yeah. So your overall score, which most of the time you finish like with a score in the hundreds. So I think our last show we finished with like 153 or something like that. You want the lowest, like you want that lowest score, the total score, because then you get your dressage penalties. So say you had 45 dressage penalties, which I think would translate to be like in the 80s, like if you were ridden dressage. Then you would add your marathon penalties. So they take all of your time and your obstacles and they add it up. So say you did 7 obstacles and your total time was 5 minutes and 30 seconds in those obstacles. So then they add that all up. And then it translates to penalty points. And then cones is just a fault. So you want to go in there and you want to have 0 faults and you want to be double clear.
Okay. So that being said, I know we've talked about you're working on cantering right now, but out of those three different, out of dressage, marathon, and cones, which one of those has been the most difficult for you?
I would say dressage, just with the fact that he's never been a happy dressage horse. He does it, and some days he's great, and you really gotta like hope that the day that you're gonna go do dressage is gonna be one of his like good days, because he's really tough to work with when he's having like, I don't want to do this today. Like he's one of those. So I'd say dressage, and I would say our like the best phase that we have currently would be cones.
And as far as like getting help and stuff like that,
most challenging.
I know you said your mom and grandparents, and you've got some help around you. But do you have other people you go to? Are there like clinics you can go to, or books, or to read, or DVDs, or like folks that you can get around at a really high level that you learn from?
My mom's friend, who's also an FEI judge. So we have like I think it's 90 days between a show she's judging at. She's come out, she's helped us a little bit. Last winter, we had a top driver's trainer. He came out and he gave us some lessons when we were in Florida. He's back in Germany now. But so we had his help. But we're also very picky. There's a lot of clinics, but we're also very picky on who works with Commanda for the fact that if I had another horse, I'd be like going to all these clinics. But everyone seems to have already worked with him and they've gotten nowhere. So it's like a fine line of, well, we can go. And we went to one clinic and my mom stood on the ground and I had the director of the USEF driving. She got in the back where we're friends and through the driving, and she's helped us a lot. She got in the back and my mom stood next to the clinician and was like, I'll stand here. Like, if I don't want something done, like, I'll just tell you. So, because he's very, like, I want to say probably half of the trainers now have already worked with him when he was younger.
Wow, that's so funny that the world you're in is small enough that your horse has a reputation that precedes him. That's hilarious. But
yeah, and he remembers voices.
Yeah. Wow, that's really something. So if somebody wanted to get started in this, like totally out of the blue, like how do you think they should go about it? Because just buying a cart, like I don't even know where you guys get those things from. Is there, like, do you know who made your cart, or did you order it online, or did you? I mean, you probably have like a hand-me-down, but I'm sure if you needed to buy new equipment, like where do you go for stuff like that?
I would go to Bennington. Our U.S. distributor is actually an hour from us, and he's a good family friend now. And I had my aunt's old marathon vehicle, which had no delayed steering, no fifth wheel brake. It was like from the 90s, early 2000s. And I went down to Live Oak for the youth class. The first year they had it, I drove a borrowed horse, and I drove a Bennington because the owner had a Bennington. And he called us and he's like, what can I do to keep her in a Bennington? So it was my second ever show. My third show, he lent me his carriage and I took it to it, and we bought that one from him. And then turns out my horse was hitting, we have like nudge bars. So it's like kind of like our step to get on. And it also keeps, like, if you hit a post, the post doesn't go into your wheel then. And so he was hitting that. So then he actually had ordered a bigger one for his horse and he didn't like it. So we traded our carriages. So that's where my silver one is from now. So I get my carriages from Bennington. So they come over from England. I had to think about that, from England. But a lot of people drive Glinkowski's, which are a Polish company, I believe. I think it's Polish.
Okay. Yeah. Doesn't have to be exact. Boy, it sounds like the community is a pretty welcoming group. Like, it's not too cliquey. If you were trying to get into it, you'd get some help, and there's camaraderie there, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Because no one wants to join something that's like so cliquish you can hardly get in. You've got to like fight your way in. And then once you get in, you got to turn and like fight the other people from getting in.
Yeah, you definitely have different groups. Like sometimes, and it depends on what show you're at. Sometimes you're with a group that you're like, you can't trust farther than you can throw. And then sometimes you're with a group that's like the best people in the world. And you're like, this is so much fun. Why aren't they all like this? But yeah, it definitely depends. And if you get into like, a good support system with like trainers and, other drivers, you're normally pretty good. But then at the same time, you also have people who I don't know what the best way to put it is, but they get like annoyed that came out of nowhere. I've had somebody tell me this before too. They're like, well, it's just, I was like, why are you so rude? And they're like, well, you came out of nowhere and it's really frustrating.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. And
like in terms of your competitiveness, you mean?
Yeah, but I was like, I'm just I think I was 18 at the time. I'm an 18-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, and I mean, came out of nowhere is relative for someone who has like the background and the family that you have, right? Because it's like, yeah, out of nowhere, but it's not like you learned how to drive last year or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like I always knew how to drive, and then I've had somebody tell me that they don't understand how, at the time it was 1.5 years, and they don't understand how I went from training to intermediate within 1.5 years and all this stuff. And I was like, well, I I've just been progressing, and if he stops or doesn't want to go up higher, or if I'm like, I'm not good enough at this level yet, I'll just stay at that level. And so we'll try the 3-star and see how he does. And then if it's not, because we have to add another obstacle in. So if he can't handle it, if we're like, oh, we don't know, then we'll just drop back down to 2-star with him. And he's a competitive 2-star horse. So
yeah.
Gotcha. And when you say, because you explained this earlier, when you say add another obstacle, like just an additional one, it's not like a new one or anything.
Correct.
Like
so,
that. Okay. It's not like a new type of obstacle or something that
correct.
only 3-stars do. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have FEI 2-stars only allowed to do 6 obstacles. And each course, I want to say, Live Oak has 7. And then a bunch of like Tryon, I think, has like 8 or 9. But they just add that one onto the track. So it adds distance. So last year, this spring, our marathon was 7.8 kilometers at Tryon as a 2-star. And the 3-star horses went 8.5.
Okay.
So it adds distance.
So it's like obviously there's a training component and he's got to like hang with you mentally longer, but part of that is like a fitness and physical ability standpoint. Like, can he handle adding this extra like 1.2 kilometers or whatever it ends up being?
And we also have to look at his age. So we're like, if he just doesn't seem super game, then we'll be like, okay, you can stay 2-star. You know, I have no pressure on him to be like, we got to go make the next championships. Like,
right.
You know, so I just like, I enjoy it and I have fun with him. And I have some young horses coming up, but yeah, so it's interesting to have fun with some horse who's been there and done that already. And then for him to teach me the ropes, and now we're learning FEI together. Yeah,
no, that's pretty special. So the movements get harder in dressage. With the marathon, it sounds like it gets longer. How does the level of difficulty go up in the cones? Is it just like harder patterns, or how does that work?
Most of the time, up until recently at Tryon, it's the same pattern for everyone. So they've added new elements called like waves over the last few years. So that's like a staircase type thing. So you go through A and you have to make a hard right or a hard left to get to B, and then a hard right, hard left, all the way through D. And, but they flipped a few numbers around at Tryon for the 3-stars since it's a championship year. So they could see their ability and who could prove themselves to go over to represent the USA the best. But our courses, the only thing that changes really at FEI is the width. So they get really tight. So we have I think it's 160 centimeters between the cones, and our carriage track is 138. So they get tighter. But then at training level, now looking at it as somebody who's gone FEI, I walk the cones and they're set at training level because they're normally the first people to go through the day. And you're like, you can drive a tractor trailer through them. So it just gets tighter and the times get faster. So you can try on this spring. We won cones, which I was very, very pleased with him. We went double clear and we were 11 seconds under our time, which was 236 or 236 or 242, something like that. But so you have to make your time and then not hit anything as well.
So I've got a technical question on the cones there, because I was reading through a few of the rules before we did this just to kind of get caught up. And clearly I've missed a bunch of them so far. Must have read it backwards. But one thing I saw was that I think the groom or your outrider can't help you when you go through the cones. Is that correct? You walk that by yourself, and they can't like give you advice on how to navigate that or help you remember where to turn?
So it's now just changed recently.
Okay.
They're allowed to talk in cones. They're not allowed to talk in dressage, and you can have your trainer and your groom. You have one or the other walk the cones with you, but they have to be on your entry form.
Okay.
So they have to sign with your entry form. So they're allowed to walk with you. So like my mom, actually, I'm very mean in my cones. She walks it once with me. I tell her what I'm going to do, what she thinks. And she's like, no, like, that's stupid. Like, don't do that. Like, what are you thinking? And then I also only tell her, she used to talk to me a little bit in cones. And I realize now that I have to wear my glasses, even though I don't like how my photos turn out in my glasses. I like my contacts much better. I have to wear my glasses, and she's not allowed to talk to me in cones because I can't focus. And so I only have her, like, if it's going to be, say, okay, Tryon, not to keep going back to Tryon, but my mom wasn't even on the back. It was a good family friend, Valerie Poloni, and I told her, I said, I don't have her talk to me in cones. She didn't even walk the course. Her husband was driving later. She's like, it'll be fine. I'm going in blind. It'll be fine. And I was like, okay. I said, say clear after I get through 11, because it was a hard right, and then you had to make it around a whole nother set of cones and go back in to get into 12. And I was like, just say clear. And so I have them say clear when the back axle goes through, so that way I know I'm good and I can turn. And we also, a lot of people, if you watch cones, they canter a lot in their cones, but I don't let him canter at all in cones. He gets too excited, so he just does a big, nice trot through everything, and we seem to be making our time so far.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, something that big can cover a lot of ground in a trot, right?
Yeah. He did the whole cones course at Tryon and at Live Oak at a trot and made the time easily.
Oh, wow. So the deal with your glasses, though, and contacts, is that a part of the rules, or is that just a personal thing?
It's a personal thing. I actually drove my marathon at Live Oak with my contacts, and I hit something for the first time. I've never touched a post in my life, ever, for like the 2 years at the time I was doing it. My mom we had an ice cream party for the kids, and so my mom told the kids, the only goal is not to hit anything, and that's Ryley's goal each time I go out with her. And I remember looking at her and saying, you just jinxed me. And sure enough, we went into the second obstacle, and I wailed a post. And she's like, well, at least you hit it. When you hit it hard.
Dang.
Like, thanks. But he drug us through it. But I was wearing my contacts. And then I figured out last fall that if I wear my glasses for some reason, I drive better. And I don't know why in my cones. I was like, oh, I drive better with my glasses on. I went double clear. And so now it's kind of like a superstition too with us. But even in a car, I'm close on my left side. So if I drive with my glasses, I seem to be right in the middle where you're supposed to be in between the lines. So I kind of just started doing that with the horses. And I've noticed a big difference with my driving when I wear my glasses versus my contacts for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
So I know it sounds weird, but I told my mom, I was like, I'm not gonna wear my contacts anymore at horse shows if I'm driving.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. That's not something I've ever paid attention to, and but my wife wears contacts, and so now I'm kind of up to speed on the whole like contacts versus glasses thing, and like the randomest things will come up, and then she'll want to wear glasses like versus contacts, and so I can't imagine because it's not something I've gone through, but it just kind of it made me think because I was kind of that's funny. I didn't know if maybe they had a rule like for dress or something. I don't know. You got to wear glasses.
No, and like with the contacts, it's harder because they dry out so much worse on marathon.
Yeah.
Like I was one at Spring Fling, and I told my mom we got sand in our eyes from the water obstacle. He was going so fast, and we were both like drenched, and he picked up sand from the bottom of the footing, and she had a water bottle in the back for some reason. And I remember as I was driving to the next obstacle, just pouring water onto my face to get the sand out of my contacts. And then after that one, I actually took my contacts out going to the sixth obstacle because I was like, I couldn't do it anymore.
Oh, wow.
But my glasses are definitely better. I do have to say. So it's just like something interesting.
That is interesting.
Kind of figured out over the last 2.5 years.
Yeah. Well, every little bit of performance helps. You got to do what you can, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to stay up with all the rules too.
Well, that's what I was thinking because I was asking you about the rule with the groom helping you versus not helping you. And if that just changed, like how long ago did that change and how often are they updating this thing?
Probably they edit them throughout the year and then they publish them at the first of the year. So
once a year you've got like your rules for the year.
And it's actually really interesting if you wind up pulling up the FEI rulebook and you pull up the marked up one. So like with all the red, everything in red's the rule changes for this year. And, we always have a copy of both on our phones. So that way you can be like, well, what changed? Because this isn't making sense. And you can go and look and be like, oh, that's what's changed.
Yeah, that makes sense that they would highlight that. Otherwise, you'd probably miss a bunch of stuff.
Some yeah, it's challenging. Like we have different notes because he's actually allergic to bugs.
Mm-hmm.
When I say that, he gets bit and he just starts ripping open his like bite marks. So he has like his like medicine we put on it. So we have notes from vets for the FEI saying he's allowed to have it because he has to have it because it's the only thing that keeps it healing. And it's like, it's crazy because then once you get within that window, he can't even have certain fly sprays on him.
Yeah.
Because they have different drugs in them.
Oh, some of the like drug testing stuff is crazy. I don't know if FEI is the same way, but I know USEF lavender is on the banned substance list.
Yes.
And it's like there's like lavender shampoos for horses that you can't use on your horse.
Yeah,
it's wild.
It's crazy. Like I used to wear lavender on my wrists from my sports psychologist, and it was like always something he had in his room that would smell when he was talking to you. So he gave me a little bottle. He's like, this is like 2 years ago when I was like first starting out because I had really bad, like I got nervous a lot, and then I don't know what changed, but recently I'm just like, oh, it is what it is. It's fine. Like it doesn't matter. But I used to wear lavender, and then once we started going higher up, I was like, I can't wear my lavender anymore. Because if it gets onto him, then I'm like, great. But yeah, like
interesting.
It's crazy.
You couldn't get a note from the psychiatrist.
I know. I was thinking.
Well,
but yeah, he has his own special fly spray bottles. Like when my grandfather goes up to shoe him, where like you can only use Commandus fly spray starting at this date on him and all this stuff, and he's like, really? It used to never be like this when I used to shoe horses all the time, and I'm like, oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, can you talk about that for just a minute? Because, it's funny. You said now you're pretty comfortable, competing. And I feel like when Joe and I first started this podcast, the way we might have felt a few times, we probably should have went and got a podcast psychiatrist, but we really shouldn't have because the main thing has been repetition. Now that we've done a bunch of these things, it's not really a big deal. Dead air doesn't scare us, all kinds of things. You're just like, whatever. It's a podcast. We're having a conversation with a friend, So did that sports psychologist really help you? Or was it just kind of something you did as you were trying to work through stuff? And if he did help you, could you kind of talk about maybe one or two of the things that you worked through?
Yeah, I would say like one of the things he helped me work through a lot is I would get so nervous before dressage. I don't even know why anymore. I don't remember why I get so nervous, but I remember talking to him, and the more I just kept going and like talking to him about it, and then he would, just repetition over and over again. By the spring of last year, I really was just like, oh, okay, like it's just another horse show. Like it doesn't matter how you do. You're just doing it because you enjoy being with the horses. If you get a ribbon, it's nice, but it's fine if not. Because if you're doing it like with the driving, especially because we don't really have a lot of it's not like a money making sport like some of the jumpers, like the big FEI jumping shows where they like cash out, or like the big rodeos. So it's like if you're in the driving, you're in it because you love doing it, and if you don't like doing it, you should find a different discipline to go do if you're just in it for like money. But so he helped me with like my nervousness, and then also just like not being afraid to at shows, like in warm-up rings, you probably know it, Joe, from being on the side of the hunters, you have to like own your ring, because if you don't own your ring, you're never going to get on the rail. And it's like the most messed up way ever to warm up sometimes. And I was always really scared about like warm up rings for some reason. So I really worked through that. But that only lasted for like about 6 months. And then I was like, oh, it doesn't matter. I just have to, just stay on my rail and stay like a safe distance away. And if they come near me, then that's their problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I think that's hard. Like I haven't. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I haven't done much competing, and I'm just now starting to get around people that do compete or are interested in it, and I don't even know that I'm going to, but I do appreciate their attitude towards riding, and and it's the structure, I think. Like they have a job for their horse. And, you know, Joe and I, now Joe has got more of a background in competing, but we've both kind of worked in the horsemanship world, and we still do. But so many times in the horsemanship world, like people, it's almost like people kind of get into it just to be better than other people. That's kind of what they're chasing. It's not even always a structured thing they're trying to chase. And so the people that have structure and they actually have goals, like they tend to be nicer to be around. The ones that are just trying to get better than other people, it's such a moving target that really you just kind of focus on being kind of a jealous human being rather than actually being good at something that you're chasing. And so you can even get nervous, like in the horsemanship world. Like you can go to a clinic to learn, but next thing you know, you're riding in there trying to ride better than the other people that are learning. It's like, it's really messed up. Like you shouldn't be in that headspace, but it can happen to people. And I'm sure it's similar to competing, but that's something I've been finding over the last couple of years is like learning how to really pursue a goal and really get specific about what you're working on, kind of build structure, whether you're being judged in a competition or you're working on something for a competition, or you just have goals for a horse. So you have structure and then ride them in a way where you're just having fun and you don't care about the other people around you.
Yeah.
And that can be really tricky. But the more that I've been able to do that, the more enjoyable the riding is, and you get closer and closer to the goal or the structure, whatever it is you're trying to achieve. You actually get more done and enjoy it more at the same time. And I think a lot of people, not just competitors, can relate to that. Because, I mean, let's face it, if you're riding horses, I think a lot of people ride horses. It's kind of an image thing. And I'm not saying people don't do it because they enjoy it. Part of it is, like, part of the image is you enjoy having the image of being a horse person. And right away when there's anything having to do with image or like, this is what I do, this is cool, you're trying to be better, trying to look better. You're trying to, you know, you don't want to do it half-assed. And so I think everybody can kind of relate to that feeling of nervousness. And that's really cool that you had to work through that, because that's really tough to kind of like throw that out, to like throw out the feeling of needing to be better than other people and then take on like a new goal of just achieving the thing you're after. Like, you want to do it as quick as possible. It might take a lot longer than that. It doesn't matter. You're going to give it your best, and you're not really going to worry about like where you stack up to everybody else, because it doesn't matter anyway. So I think that's cool. I think most people probably struggle with that exact thing in one way or another, you know? And did he give you like any specific exercises to work on in the moment when you were feeling that way?
Yeah, he kind of just said, like, you know, think about like what we talked about. Like, he gave me a saying, and I honestly, I don't even remember it. I think it was like
good.
cancel it or something. Like, you know, like you talk to yourself, like, yeah, like you kind of just like you talk to yourself like in your head, because you know it's all in your head and you're like doubting, or you're like, oh, you know, they just went in there and they just did an amazing test, and now I'm gonna go in there and it's gonna be like horrible. And so when I was younger, because I think I was like 16 and a half, like 17, and I was dealing with like, you know, high school and everything too, and I was it was just, I think it was cancel that, like tell yourself like knock it off, like you're fine, you've done this before, like why are you nervous? Like, it's just another show.
Yeah, I mean, you know something,
type of thing.
I think if you get into any circle and you feel that way, like figure out who it is you feel that way about and go meet that person. Just go say hi, introduce yourself. 9 times out of 10, they're super friendly, and you're going to be like, oh, they're my friend. Like, I could learn from them. And then you feel comfortable. Or they're like a total asshole, and then don't be like them anyway. So it's like, go meet that person. Don't wait like 3 or 4 years watching somebody ride and feeling all jealous and little and like irritated that you're not good enough and worried about how you look around them. Go meet them. Go figure out what they're like, and you'll probably find they're a nice person, and that'll kill a lot of that feeling.
Yeah. And it also helped me having my mom and Mary, our family friend, because she, even though she owns the horses, she was always like, I have no expectations. She's like, if you ever just want to stop, it's fine. Like, you know, because we didn't get them to do this. We got them to drive around the field, and she's always wanted them. So she always wanted to have a pair of horses. So, and then it kind of just took off from there. And so when we go to show, she's like, I have no expectations for you. Like, just go out, have fun. And my mom's the same way. She's like, no expectations. She goes, if you get a great score, great. She's like, but as long as we're having fun, because if we're not having fun, there's no point in doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, that's such a great way to go about it. And the horses do so much better, you know? You start out that way and you can go as far as you want. But yeah, if you're not enjoying it, it's not, especially with horses, it's just not really worth doing it if you don't enjoy doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's other ways to spend your time and energy and money.
Yeah. And if you're trying to make money, a lot better ways to make it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you're gonna be out there, you gotta enjoy it, because it's pointless otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this has been a really fun conversation, Ryley. I feel quite enlightened about the world of competitive driving now.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah. Cool. So, I know you mentioned at the beginning, so you're gearing up for kind of your next part of the season?
Yes.
Yeah. And when does that start?
So I'm trying to do the math. We ship out on August 6th, and so we're taking the Mini and the 2 big horses with the RV and another trailer behind that to put carriages in, because we're like trying to keep everything. We're like, we can pack more if we have another trailer.
There you go.
So I will they have a little HDT, and it's at the American Driving Society level. And so the first day is like driving trials. So we do dressage, cones, and marathon. And I'll do that with Commanda just for warm up before our 3-star in the fall. Because he hasn't been to a show that he's done a marathon at since April. So we'll kind of see, because during our off time, when we have the few months in between, he just goes out and does fitness training. We don't really school any obstacles or anything, because he gets too excited. And so,
sure.
So we just kind of go out and we just get him really fit. And then we hope we have steering when we get into the first obstacle. So we'll do that. And then Mary, she'll show the Mini and Windfall in the pleasure part. So then we're up there for 3 days, and Commando will kind of just chill out and hang out after he does his thing. And then we'll leave a month after that and go to Tryon. So we're just using it as like a little, to go support the show and to use it instead of going and shipping an hour off to go do some obstacles before we head off to Tryon.
Cool.
Yeah, just kind of like a schooling thing.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter how we do, as long as we get through it and he's happy.
Yeah.
So, and then we'll put the pressure on a little bit for Tryon.
That's awesome.
See what we can produce. So
yeah. Before we wrap up, do you want to plug like either yourself as a competitor, like any social media you have, or I know you guys said you have what's it called again? Something performance horses or something like that.
BPM BPM sport horses. So
BPM sport horses.
Yeah.
Are they Facebook, website, anything like that?
No, just through me. So just my 2 Instagrams, which is my name, Ryley Miller, but I have 2 Ys at my last Y in my first name, and then my RLM combined driving page. Okay. And then just all my sponsors are also on there. I have 1K, Fenwick, Triple Crown, Dapple Up Horses, which is an FEI legal shampoo if anyone needs any shampoos.
No lavender, huh?
No lavender. And it actually really helps with the bugs and inflammation. And it's like the best stuff ever. Back on Track and Farm Vet.
All right. Oh, is that
awesome?
Yeah. Anyway,
cool.
Farm Vet. No, that's the only one I recognized. Big fan.
Yeah.
Hey, great to meet you.
And Whisper Wash.
Okay. What did you say that last one was?
Yeah. Whisper Wash. It's Mary's company as well.
Okay.
So they're one of my sponsors as well.
Cool. So. All right. Well, hey, great to meet you, and good luck and safe travels. And that's
Thank
awesome.
We'll
be checking out. I'll have to look you up on Instagram and check out. You probably have some videos and stuff of you competing, huh?
Yes, we also have a bunch of. I'm a Flare Strip ambassador too, so we have a bunch of little Flare videos that are silly. Like if you scroll through, and you can find a Christmas one. We dressed up as Santa and an elf and made him a Rudolph and went through a Christmas tree field. So just like stupid little fun things that we enjoy doing. So
poor horse,
nice,
but a lot of fun.
Awesome,
cool.
Well, don't hang up, but we are gonna. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on and making time. It's always a privilege to get to talk to cool people. So don't hang up, but we are going to stop recording.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you.